This episode is dedicated to the life of Michelle Mintz-Menke, whose stars shine the brightest in our community. Her radiant personality, selfless nature, and positive attitude kept her going through the toughest of battles, and it's that spirit that will forever keep her memory alive. We love you, Michelle, and we'll miss you always.
I know where you've been. See, Jeff? I told you we should come down here and play more often. I keep telling you. Now, when we came here today, before there were people in here, you could really see the signs over here. It said, welcome to the home of the... Welcome to the home of the Oklahoma City Thunder. I asked Jeff, I said, do you think that's always up there, or are they just doing that to rub it in? So, apparently, not too long ago, somehow basketball came up, and I used an offensive word and then attached it to the name of your city, but. And it was early on in the show, I remember, so I can't blame it on drugs or alcohol. So, but we're gonna talk about this later on. We've gone to some therapy, we've dealt with our anger issues. So let's, So we're gonna talk about that later and clear everything up. But until then, we got a lot of songs to play, and we gotta keep it rocking. And away we go.
You're listening to Live on Four Legs, the definitive live Pearl Jam podcast, featuring
Mr. Stone Gossard. Fucking Cameron in the truck. Mr. Boom Gasper. You can call me Al, you can call me Ed, you just fucking call me, why don't you?
Hey everybody now, welcome to Live on Four Legs, a definitive live Pearl Jam podcast. It feels like this week we are getting into the latter stages of what Pearl Jam is as a live act. I think it gets a little bit different once you hit post-COVID, but this is kind of the beginning of the maturity of what would become the quote-unquote geriatric Pearl Jam era, where now they're in their 50s and 60s. They were just getting to the point of early 50s in 2013, and that'll obviously come as the years come. But it does feel like 2013 is kind of this year where just throw everything out there. Put it out and see if it works, and try to get in as much of it as humanly possible. These shows probably average out to almost 3 hours a night. Probably average out to around 32 to 33 songs per night. Obviously, some give or take a little bit on both ends, but this, as most of you know, was not a year where they utilized openers. The show that we're going to talk about today, actually, well, in spite of that, did have an opener, but most of these other shows, like 90% of these shows, did not. And it was billed as an evening with Pearl Jam. So you get them on stage around 8:30. They play for a full 3 hours. And not only that, but you get everything. You get just about every album represented. You get rarities, deep cuts, just anything that you can think of thrown in as much as humanly possible to just try and change things, to try and put more fan service into it. And that's what it was. It was a big fan service year, and it was all basically United States, North America. Not to mention that Wrigley Field is the biggest moment, and that's really before the Lightning Bolt tour even starts. You have some massive things that happen in 2013. So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about Oklahoma City. The reason why we chose Oklahoma City was, well, it was anticipating a certain team from Oklahoma City maybe making the NBA Finals, but that didn't happen. However, since the NBA Finals is going on and they were the last champion from last year, it is relevant to bring up the conversation of, oh, a band from Seattle heading into Oklahoma City for the first time since their team got sold and moved there. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. There's a lot of discussions to be had, a big set. So why delay on all those fun topics? Why not just get into it right now? Randy Sobel over here, Javier Hervas over there.
Hey, Randy, I prefer the term maybe golden years. Just to refer to them as they're getting a little older, but yeah, like you were saying, so many interesting conversations about this time. It feels that there's so many songs that we need to cover, that there's so many different things that we need to talk about, but we're gonna try to extend it a little bit more since 13, 14, 15 feels more like a continuation of the same tour in different legs, different continents, and all that kind of stuff. And talk about that to all who celebrate. The World Cup will start this week. Hopefully, we're gonna have some fun games too. I'm excited for that. Sorry, Steve, Italy is not in. I know, Chile's not in either. So, so we're in the same boat.
How does
Um,
Italy and Chile not make the World Cup?
I don't know, man. That's a different episode. But yeah, hopefully it's one of my favorite things just to watch and kind of like celebrate different like teams and all that kind of stuff. So excited for those games to be watched. But yeah, going back to what you were mentioning, Oklahoma City, first time for them going back after the Sonics got sold, and a lot of very interesting topics of conversation because we're around the time where everything goes and you're going to have very long shows, and sometimes that's going to play in their favor and sometimes it won't be that way. I'm excited to cover this one because we're getting into uncharted waters right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's good that you bring that up because yeah, there is overall very much positives to this. But yeah, in the other retrospect, I think it does hurt a little bit when they're trying to push a little bit too much. And when you listen to it on bootleg 13 years later, you can kind of tell in spots, okay, well, early in this show, Ed clearly does not have his best game on this. I'm just going to kind of spoil that now. It's not anything that I think bothered me the whole time, but you can tell like some of the things. Oh, they opened with Wash, and that big scream at the end of Wash was definitely kind of hesitant to be that big moment that it usually ends up being. And then you get midway through the show, and okay, there's some certain songs that maybe, no, why pick this? Why this choice? But I see where they want to push. I see why they want to push because the last couple of years of the band, we get some deep cuts here and there every now and again, but it feels like they're just in this position to look at this band from 20 plus years from the beginning. And I always thought of it as whenever the band decides to go back to songs that they hadn't played in a long time, it's maybe even less of the fan service aspect, but more of just get reacquainted with these songs that we at one point loved, and we wrote them and we felt good about them. It's not songs that they were necessarily not playing every night. I mean, Other Side, of course, is one of those songs that gets brought back and actually is crossed off of this show, surprisingly enough. We can get into that much later. But it's songs like Thumbing My Way, which was played a ton in the Riot Act era. Thumbing My Way went from 2006 to 2013 not being played at all, which is pretty surprising to me. That feels like one you could throw in there, especially with how relatable those lyrics can be and how people really, really enjoy the song. That one feels strange that they wouldn't bring it back. Soon Forget, another one, maybe just don't focus on the ukulele as much during that era. And also, it's kind of highly political in a way. And maybe they just weren't feeling those kind of songs. So things change over time. But that one came back after a long time. What about Let Me Sleep? That one is played at a Bridge School show in 1994 and then completely ignored, except for that Imogene and Corniche DVD where they play it up in the stands, and then got brought back at the Seattle show. I believe it was like 612 shows, something like that, something ridiculous, insane. But they're going back to these because they're probably thinking in their heads, do we still have it? Can we still do it? What do we got? We kind of miss them. Let's see what we have. Maybe this is seen as like the last time that they really were willing to take those chances, as consistent as it was.
Another aspect that I always thought that it was very worth to consider is when they're getting into this time of their lives, they can really start to see things with a little bit more perspective. And I've always felt that sometimes big bands, they just have option A, or I take this door and we're just going to be safe and conservative with the sets. Maybe we don't want to stretch it as much, or maybe the setting is different. Maybe we're going to focus more on visuals or stuff like that. I've always thought that this band was very, very brave because also, yes, you are going to get reacquainted with old songs and you're going to get familiar with songs that maybe at some point they had so much more meaning to them than what it was at this point. But also, it's a very good point and it's a very interesting way just to keep in your toes and make themselves to be completely interested in having that surprise factor that like is going to keep you driving as a band. Even though the sometimes execution is not going to be perfect, I'm always going to commend them for that because it could have been so easy just to say like, hey, you know what, this is a pool of 100 songs that we're going to continue to work on, and that's it. But they have said it so many times, even up till last year, like everything is up for grabs. And this time is a very good reflection of that. Is anything can happen, anything can be played, and they're just gonna try it. Maybe they're not very comfortable with it, but they're just gonna try it anyways.
Let's talk a little bit about the record that was being promoted. This was the Lightning Bolt era in 2013, and it felt like it lasted a very long time because they were still touring without a new album in 2018. And then when Gigaton comes out in 2020, they don't really tour for another year and a half until the couple of festivals that they did as COVID was starting to dissipate a little bit. So it lasted for a long time. It lingered there. And some of those songs now, a lot of those songs now really do not get even sniffed at Pearl Jam shows. You'll get a Mind Your Manners every now and again that gets thrown in. I think that's kind of an easy one for them. But popular songs in the era, like Sirens. Sirens has not been played since 2018. Lightning Bolt has been played, I believe, twice since the Lightning Bolt, quote unquote, era. That's not one that they can really replicate from the way it sounded here. And we'll get into that when that song pops up. But even songs that are kind of down the totem pole a little bit, like My Father's Son, not even in the conversation. Let the Records Play is not in the conversation. Swallowed Whole's not in the conversation. Yellow Moon, I think, only got played once in the post-COVID era. So it's really sparse after a while, but when the album comes out, you know that the band is feeling a handful of songs and they kind of see what they're doing with them. And I will be pretty honest here. Out of the 12 records, Lightning Bolt is my least favorite record. And we were kind of talking about this before starting to record. And the reason being is that it just doesn't feel like it has a concrete identity. Are you a dark record? Are you a record that inspires hope? Are you a record that is worried about the current climate of the world? I'm not sure of what the theme is, and I'm not sure of what the tone is because you start off pretty energetic and pretty heavy, and then somewhere along that line, it just shifts, and you're not sure where the A side and the B side really mesh together. What do you think about all that, and why do you think that record might not have that?
For me, it always felt like it's a very disjointed album. It feels that those songs are a very definitive postcard of a very specific time frame for them. It feels that is one of those albums where you have so many songs to pick from, but you had a bunch of that you really liked from the previous recording, and you kind of like want to maybe try to recover them and try to record them, and maybe they never got to that point where a few songs that they are included in the album, but it feels scattered to me. It feels like I would say, disjointed. Lately, we have gotten lucky because the concepts I think are very clear, but in this record, you see the art, and you're like, is this a dark album? Are you trying to give us a message? Like, what should we trying to like gather here? And you don't have that consistency, which is, I think, that's the confusing thing about the album itself. Personal opinion, I think there are really good B sides in this album, but maybe not songs that they should have made the cut. Let the records play, for example. A really good riff that it was kind of wasted in a song that is going nowhere after the first riff. But there's a lot of stuff that I always thought that it was kind of confusing, because one of the things that this band has is that sometimes it's upsetting for fans, and that they work in certain ways that maybe it's not going to be everything upstream, or it's going to follow like one continuous flow, that it's going to be in batches. And this is the album where you can really tell that you have batches of songs that were put together just to make an album, but actually the timeline is a little bit more scattered than what we would like.
Yeah, I said it to you. As much as I love the song, album wise, I think Pendulum is in a really, really weird spot. I think it works
Mhm.
so much better as a live song. And obviously, they knew what to do with it. Hey, let's use it as the opener. Let's follow up with some like minded songs and then blast some energy into this crowd. And for the record, at a point where maybe you needed to bring back some energy, the energy after Lightning Bolt does not return to that record. And that's what I'm bummed about because I still happen to love the title track. I love it so much. I think it was a phenomenal live song in this era, and it gave you something that the rest of the record didn't necessarily offer. And it maybe in that aspect felt like it could have been a big hit off of Backspacer because Backspacer had more of those kind of songs that would have fit in nicely with your Supersonics and Amongst the Waves kind of songs and Got Some and Fixer and all that. Would have worked really well, actually. But you don't capitalize off of that. That's where that all ends. Like, Infallible doesn't really pull you back in like that. Swallowed Whole, I think they thought would give that energy and it never stuck. And with the last three songs on the record, that completely kind of dies out. I love Yellow Moon. Yellow Moon is a great song, and I will make a point when we get to Yellow Moon that we can expand on. But for the last three songs on the album, it does not finish as strongly as maybe you thought the first couple would have. And then when you think about the identity of what they utilized it as live, I turned the record on for the first time, heard Getaway, and I'm like, that's it. It's Lightning Bolt and Getaway. Those were my two favorite songs. And then Getaway was never a live song because they couldn't find that punch. So it's weird. It's very, very weird in that retrospect. But they did make something out of it. They were able to utilize these songs within the set, sometimes well, sometimes a little awkwardly. And I think both of those conversations get to be had with this show in Oklahoma City today. So we're going to jump right in, and the conversations about the Oklahoma City Thunder and Seattle Supersonics will happen as the show goes on. There'll be times where he mentions it. There's going to be a big time where he talks about the whole thing and the whole situation. We'll talk about the Kings situation and all of that. We'll get into it all. But I think right now we just start it the same way we start, and that's with the set list. So, opening song here, as I kind of mentioned, Pendulum. It was the opener for nearly every single night on this tour. To my surprise, I thought it really was every single time. But out of the 25 shows they did in North America on this leg, October, November, December, it was only 18 of those 25 times. And that feels light to me because I would have guessed like 23 out of 25. So no, this show does not open with Pendulum. However, you do get a really good one to open with here. It's Wash.
Oh, please, let it rain today. This city's so filthy, like my mind in waves. Oh, was the time like a clean new taste, smiling eyes before me, inches from my face. Wash my love, wash my love, wash my love.
I think this version of Wash grooves really well. And instead of opening up with the newest song, you opened up with one of the oldest songs. I think that's a nice little dichotomy there. If you're following around on this tour, this is the second show after the Dallas show that happens on the second leg. So there's been a little bit of time, like 2 weeks in between, where they've had a little time to rest. So with that being said, when you hear Ed's vocals on Wash, I kind of referenced it before, they're not as strong as the big belting scream should be. And you're thinking to yourself, like, okay, it's either a slow start or maybe it's just not in the cards for this one. It's not a bad show for Ed vocally. There's some of those things where maybe he's not going to be able to hit right in the same way, but it is disappointing when you can't get that first big belt out of Wash to start your show.
Right, because a good performance is going to give you that tone setter, right? And I feel that we don't have that here. That's one of the negatives for the singer in this case. Like, really good for the band because they can play a lot of stuff, but the singer physically is going to feel it. And as we know, later on, also Matt Cameron stated many times that those longer sets were getting a little too much over his body. So actually, when I was reading the notes too, like my assumption is 13 and 14, it was always Pendulum and that was it, or the double opener that sometimes they utilize in 2014 as well. But it's a really good song to start a show, and we can be picky about that, but the vocal side is missing.
What is there, however, is that right at the tail end of the song, Ed immediately picks up that guitar and he's ready. Right as that kind of that last dun 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 dun, like right as that's kind of ending, he picks up the guitar and starts into the riff of Sometimes. Like that to me, this is a great year for songs transitioning one into the next. I thought they nailed this. It sounded beautiful to put these two songs together. I love when they can make that work. It just works like magic sometimes. And no pun intended, I suppose. There's going to be another two songs in the set that are back-to-back at this show that I was a little disappointed because I did see those two songs back-to-back have one of the greatest transitions that you'll ever hear at a Pearl Jam show in Brooklyn that year. And they don't quite get there with this one. But Wash and Sometimes together are just a match made in heaven. That was unbelievable. And then you get Ed changing the line, help us repair, dear God. And yeah, they're rolling in this so far with Sometimes. I think Sometimes is really the one that kind of pushes it over the edge a little bit, and then Small Town to follow that. It does feel like, you know, my God, it's been 10 years. They are telling the story about them in Oklahoma. That's going to come back a little bit with Supersonic stuff a little bit later. So what's your thoughts about that transition? Because I can't get over it.
Yeah, no, it's pretty good. It's flawless. And when you hear that kind of stuff, it makes you kind of want this Sometimes as the opener itself. Like, it feels like Wash is kind of unnecessary at this point because it was just so flawless and the execution was absolutely perfect. For me, when you get that Sometimes that is going to create that very dark atmosphere is when you get the version that you're looking for, and I think they achieve it here. That transition also going into Small Town that is going to give you a little bit more like a lighter feeling over the audience and the sing-along that it comes right away. It's a really good selling point for a band that they haven't been there in a long time, but you can really tell that the audience is ready to participate too, because the audience is one of the highlights of the show too. Like, you can really tell that they were very eager to be part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they definitely bring their A game. And if you watch the video on this, there are certain songs where like Ed's looking out to them being like, okay, I see what you got. That's pretty impressive right there. So yeah, definitely worth the wait. Although they wouldn't tell you that. They wouldn't admit to that it was worth the wait, but worth the wait. And I think Ed says some point at the show, we won't wait 10 years to be back. And they didn't. They waited 9. So next section is going to kick off your momentum starters, your fire starters for this show. It's going to be Lightning Bolt into Minor Manners into Evolution, baby. After going to so many shows in 2013, again, I'll say it, the biggest takeaway that I had in this era was Lightning Bolt was the immediate hit for me. And it stayed that way throughout the next 2 or 3 years when they were touring for this record. When they debuted it at Wrigley, after everything that happened, you would think I'd go back to my hotel room, 3 o'clock in the morning, and just fall asleep right away. I was amped after all that. I could not go to sleep. And I was an hour behind or ahead, whatever it was. It was more like 4 a.m. to me than 3 a.m. But I remember going back, and I'm just like, I need to go find this fucking song. And thankfully, a lot of people that were in attendance posted it to YouTube right away. And I think a lot of different outlets posted it saying brand new Pearl Jam song, brand new Pearl Jam song. And I didn't see a lot of people posting about Future Days, but I saw a ton of people posting about Lightning Bolt. It really stuck at this point. I love the chorus of it. I love how there was this big clapping section that right from the beginning in its debut live, you can feel something special. You can feel that it's grabbing the crowd right away. And the song, the way that it has a cadence to it, the way that Ed emphasizes a lot of those lyrics in there, there's something that just draws you into it. And I could not get enough of it. I still, to this day, think it is the best song off that record. And I can't help it. And again, I will stand by what I said. They cannot play it now because it is way too difficult on Ed's voice. And even for this show where he's not 100%, it still ends up sounding pretty good because he still has that in him. But that's just kind of what was happening. It works in so many ways and really should have been, I guess, even bigger than it actually was. It was played every single night on tour, but I think this should have been a single and should have been played on radio stations everywhere. But we know that's not how this band plays.
Yeah, I remember when I heard it live for the first time too, and I was so in awe for the fact that I thought that this is a song that kind of captures every single angle of what this band is. Like, you got the melody, you got the edge, you got the crowd interaction. It is a song that you may be a very hardcore fan or a casual fan, or you're going to their shows for the first time. And if you went to around this era too, and you had one of your first shows in the Lightning Bolt tour, that song is really going to draw you in. Like, that song is going to make you participate. That song is going to make you want to sing. It's just really, really good as an intro, as a kind of like, let's get the show going. But also, it's a really good song to invite new people to like Pearl Jam around this time, which I thought that's why it was so captivating for so many people too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really approachable. It's a little bit pop rock, but it still has an electric solo. I mean, it soars to the high heavens. Like, they thought that Swallowed Whole was kind of the response to Unthought Known, and that never worked. But really, Lightning Bolt was taking Unthought Known's idea and putting a little bit more thump to it and electricity to it, and still featuring that soaring aspect that when you're viewing this from an outdoor arena feels like, you know, you're shot up into the solar system. It just is fantastic in that aspect. This week, we're going to kind of glance over Mind Your Manners just because we will get it every week for the next 4 or 5 weeks here. It's
For the next 10 years too.
Yeah, right. It's the song. So we'll bring it back, I think, next week or the week after. Who knows? But Do the Evolution I do want to bring up because here is a great example of what Do the Evolution turned into in 2013. They have those first 3 shows of the year. They're Lollapalooza Festival shows down in Sao Paulo, in Santiago, and in Buenos Aires. And Buenos Aires to me is the one out of the three that I'll go back to. That crowd is just known for doing all those harmonies and melodies and everything like that. So another Wrigley moment when they play Evolution at Wrigley that year, Ed says, like South America, like South America. So he starts doing the oh, and then everybody chimes in and follows up. And that whole entire tour, at least every time that I've seen and every show that I've listened to, it's never admire me, admire my home. It's always let's do Stone's part. Let's chant what Stone is doing.
Sing me. Oh, 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 oh. Ah, you got it.
That's the impact that it's having this year. And I think this is the first time South American shows are really tracing back to the States and making people realize how good those shows actually are.
Yeah, for sure. It's such a powerful thing for the fans too, because like that kind of moment becomes a staple that the band has chosen just to say like, all right, well, we got this when we went down there, like now everybody must do the same thing for the same song, which is super cool. And I think the audience was pretty invested too, because if I remember this clearly, it was the thing between all the forums and conversations with friends, and it was kind of like, oh, look what we did. Now everybody wants to do the same thing kind of thing.
Yep. You're only good as your last bootleg, right?
Right. right. But yeah, I'm glad that the crowd decided to participate, and then the band was so energetic about like, okay, we're gonna make this work, and this is how it's gonna be from now on. I thought that was pretty cool. South American fans, me included, we should be very, very proud of that.
Absolutely, you made your mark, 100%. And think about this: they haven't been back in 7 years, 8 years now. So
don't get me started about that.
Well, I know, but here's the thing. They have now reverted to where they're not do it like South America, do it like South America. So once they go back there and they're able to hear that crowd do it again, we're going to get it back up here too. So.
Yep. New standards will be set.
Exactly. Reorganized, refigured out, rekindled. The next two songs, they're not stopping just yet. We're going to get Animal into Let the Records Play here. And this is a very interesting spot for Let the Records Play. Following Animal, it feels like you need to continue with some crowd-friendly material because Animal is such a big crowd moment kind of song, but they opt for this one. And really, you could have still done Records Play after the speech, but they decide to do the two songs back to back instead of going into the speech. It should have been the speech in between these two if you still wanted to do Records Play there. But I'll get into that in a second as to placement for this. It has a little bit of a challenge being in this spot. It's kind of a sink or swim situation because all of these so far have been like big time fan songs. Even the two Lightning Bolt tracks, the title track and Mind Your Manners, they're big with this crowd. These are the two songs that are sitting really well with them, plus Sirens. Those are the ones that people gravitate towards. And Let the Records Play, I think some people have an attachment to it. I think yourself, you called it a B-side a couple of minutes ago, so you know how you feel about it. But to me, I don't see it as being like one of the staples off the record, and the only time where I feel like it's made a difference in a set list has been when it's been packaged with Spin the Black Circle, because it gave the song a little bit of purpose. It felt elevated, And, you play Spin the Block Circle after that, and it gives it some push. It's like, all right, well, we need to go into this big time, fast paced punk song. So let's rev up the energy into that. And it seemed like the crowd went from hot to lukewarm a little bit in that amount of time. You didn't build back up the wave at the right moment.
Yeah, and you made me think about a different concept too, because you quoted that example of Spin the Black Circle and Let the Records Play. It feels like a really good song to be like a really great wingman, but I don't think it works by itself. I think that the intro riff is outstanding, but I don't think they utilize that idea very well throughout the end of the song. Although I have to rescue, and I have to mention too that it's very exciting also when you have like band members trying new stuff. In this song, in a live setting, gave us like maybe new flavors of different like sonic textures that the guys were trying around that time. So I think that's the biggest win out of this. But in this specific show, the placement, like the song itself is just, yeah, I don't, it's a pretty good B-side. Like I said before, it's a pretty good B-side, but I don't think it should have made the cut. Sorry, Stone.
Well, somebody will be disappointed by that, but that's why everybody has an opinion, because it's kind of like assholes. Opinions are assholes, whatever you want to say. You're not an asshole. I'm a little bit of an asshole, but we'll digress into the first speech of the night here. We're just getting going. How is everybody? After a big response, he says, "See, Jeff, I told you we should play here more often. Before we came here today, you could really see the signs over here that said, 'Welcome to the home of the Oklahoma City Thunder.'" And then I asked Jeff, "Do you think that's always up there? Or are they doing that to rub it in?" So apparently, some time ago, basketball came up, and I used an offensive word and I attached it to the name of your city. It was early in the show, so I can't blame it on drugs or alcohol. We're going to talk about this later on. We've gone to therapy and we've dealt with our anger issues. So we'll clear up everything later, but we got songs to play, so we'll keep it rocking. Here's a little MFC for OKC. So we'll kind of get back into that conversation a little bit later, but just to, for anybody that's not an NBA fan, I'm not a big NBA guy at all. I actually don't like the NBA at all. I'm just not a basketball fan for any stretch. And really, the only sport that I really watch consistently in my life is probably baseball at this point. I haven't watched hockey a whole lot this year, and football I kind of teeter in and out of, but I'll watch the Bills, so that's enough. But the history behind the Sonics leaving town for Oklahoma City feels so strange, because the Sonics were such an important team from the 1990s. You had such great players there like Gary Payton and Sean Kemp, and it was kind of in this time of the NBA where movements were happening, like teams would all line up to try and beat the Bulls in the championship. And the Sonics were one of those teams that made that attempt and failed. Come, the late 2000s, the team has to sell, and they sell to an investor in Oklahoma City who basically goes out in public and says, "We are going to move because we cannot get a stadium deal done." And the current administration, I believe it was Howard Schultz that was the owner of the team. He was CEO of Starbucks. They couldn't get a deal done to redo and reconfigure the Key Arena. So they got sold and they left. And that was a big, big disappointment, because basketball was massive in Seattle and they have not been back yet. And in Oklahoma City, they actually had a little traction with basketball after Hurricane Katrina, because the New Orleans Hornets at the time went and played in Oklahoma City for a little bit when the city was rehabilitating from the hurricane. They went and played for like a season or a season and a half, something like that. And that got to show people in Oklahoma that, hey, we can have a team here long term. So we'll hold off on that point. We'll get into it a little bit later, more basketball stuff. So The section here is MFC in hiding and even flow. Back to back yield songs, very, very solid. Both performances were really, really good. Crowd was singing very well on In Hiding. You were talking about that crowd. When you can sing good on In Hiding, that's when you know you have a crowd that's kind of a level up than the average crowd right there. That's a good one and a good basis to go off of. But this is also a year where Even Flow just gets all sorts of explosive. The solo, the groove is massive. What'd you hear?
Oh, the groove. I love when Stones gets creative or he goes a little outside of the box. And like I've said before, I think a lot of people know what Mike can do. And also, I would like to point out that this is probably one of my favorite years, if not the favorite year when it comes to solo sounds. Give me an old tube screamer straight up to your face with a loud amp. That's all I need. And this is what you can hear now in this solo, especially. But really good performance. I think it has bits and pieces of all the stuff that we like about Even Flows live, and it's perfectly executed here. But for me, the highlight here is Stone for sure.
After that, Ed says he noticed the last time they played there was 10 years ago, and the time before that was 10 years before that. So he says, we got to get everything in because we may not be back until 2023. That's it. It was 22, so they were a little bit more cognizant, and it was supposed to be 2020. So they were a little bit of ahead of the curve if you go back that far. And he talks about a benefit that Kings of Leon organized in the arena after the Wrigley show that raised funds for people who were affected by a tragedy earlier that year. I did not get into looking for what the tragedy was, but good on them for raising money for sure. All right. Sirens, whipping, unthought known, and immortality are going to be sandwiched all together here. Sirens at this time was starting to utilize a little reprise outro at the end where Ed in the audience kind of did a little bit of a after the song was over. And it ended up being a really, really nice moment. But in 2013, it always came off as a little impromptu that you didn't know that Ed was actually going to do. And the band didn't seem to know what direction Ed was going to go in because, well, as we all know, Ed picked up the guitar midway through the song. Whether Ricky Ramone knew that or not is another story, but that's what happened. Consult your episodes in Brooklyn and Los Angeles for more details, for sure. But we'll have to see next week's version if it feels like a fully constructed moment where everybody kind of knows what to do after the song. Because in this one, again, it's just like Ed kind of riffing off of it and the band just sort of like kind of bounces back, but it's way more fleshed out in 2014, and it feels kind of like one of these moments that is you hear the whole song, and if you're in a certain situation, and I remember being around people that were highly emotional listening to it because hearing that they had cancer or a family member had cancer when they were playing the song, like it changed my outlook for the song as well. And with the Steve Gleason connection to the song, it had a deeper meaning than even what was put out there in words. But you have this emotional moment with the song. It's very heartfelt. It's tear inducing. And then at the end, you have a little bit more of that, just another moment to connect with the crowd and bring it back. And it's sort of like kind of the moment that tells you like things are going to be okay on the horizon. That while we're all in this and it's difficult, we're all in this together. I see that as being a bonding moment for everybody, not just band and crowd, but crowd with each other as well.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said like the bonding concept because I remember when I heard the song for the first time, I honestly thought that it was going to be a huge song for them. I don't know why it could never turn into something bigger than what it was, but just seeing the crowd reaction and so many stories that I've heard over the years and the connections and the emotional meaning that it has translated into people's lives and musically for me has every element just to make a song succeed. You have the solo, you have the emotional aspect, you have the lyrics that they have so much depth, and then you have like those chord combinations that they're always going to work. I understand the restrictions, and I understand why the song cannot be played a little bit more often live because what it meant for Ed vocally. But I remember that even somebody said to me, like, I think this is going to be the next Black. I thought, like, well, this person might be right.
I can't remember if it was on an episode that I said this or to a friend that I said this to recently, but I hated Sirens when it first came out.
Yes, I think you said it to me.
Okay. Yeah, I thought it like reminded me of a train song. I believe the
Yes.
quote was, we might have been talking about this on the Rio episode where we were watching it in full because that we had a lot of conversations during that. But
Yep.
yes, I did say get the fuck out of here with that train shit. So it grew on me though. It grew on me and has a bigger meaning now than it once did. So whipping an unthought known and immortality. Big shout out to Josh Arroyo. Whenever we can name drop him, that's kind of fun to do because he's such a great guy. But he texted us earlier today, and sometimes he sends us these videos, and he's like, "Hey, I was just in the car listening to Pearl Jam radio. Thought of you guys. Made a video for you." And he was talking about like something that we had mentioned when we were in Seattle about hearing songs and songs that like you need to hear or want to hear every single night. And whipping is that song for him. So he is like, yeah, this came on Pearl Jam radio and it's this version of whipping. I'm like, dude, did you even know? Did you even know what we were doing this week? And I don't think he had any idea. So shout out to him. Hope he's listening. That was a fun coincidental moment right there. Or maybe he knew and he was just like, see what's happening here, all tying it together. But I actually we go back into the discussion of transitions here. I thought that the unthought known transition out of whipping was terrific. Like you get some of that like noodling around a little bit, and then what that turns into is a pretty crunchy rendition of the opening riff. And I thought that that was really cool, and it brought a little bit more of a pep to the song than maybe we've seen. It was fantastic. And then what I mentioned before about one of the best transitions that I've ever heard at a live show, it was Unthought Known and Immortality. And I saw this on the set list. I'm like, oh, please. They have to know how good that was in Brooklyn. They have to know how amazing that was. And it felt like maybe they wanted to do it, but it was not seamless, unfortunately, and they did not nail the transition as well as they could have. But I appreciate the sentiment right there for sure. That's the juice they were rolling with at the time.
Yeah, the attempt was a great idea. I know the show that you're talking about, like the standard is pretty high with that. Although the highlights of Immortality are going to be the consistency of how good the same portion of the song is, I think. It's just that drumming at the end, the intensity of the solo. Those are key aspects of the song that even though that you're trying to find a less good version of Immortality, I challenge all the listeners because I don't think you're going to be able to find a lot of those.
And we had some earlier this year, I felt like some of our versions of Immortality were a little under the bar, which still means they're very good because the bar's extremely high.
Right.
But I was a little disappointed, and those were like early 90s versions. But yeah, no, not this one. Total clinic at the end. And Ed knows it because they got to stop. He says, I'm going to make a toast. And when I was a kid, there was a stool that the drummer sat on, but now I know that they don't call it a chair, they call it a throne. I couldn't figure that out until I met Matt Cameron, and now I get it. So there you go. Infallible, Wishlist, and Rearview Mirror are going to end this set right here. I think Rearview Mirror has some topics to discuss. It was a really, really good version, but I do want to tap into a thought on Infallible for a second because I could never get into this song. And I don't know what it is. It just doesn't quite appeal to me like maybe other late era Pearl Jam songs do. And I don't know if it's just kind of that droning sound that pushes the song. Maybe it's the cadence of Ed's voice in the verses, and it doesn't click with me like 98% of other Pearl Jam songs do. And I could never really figure out why.
You're always going to have one of those or a few of those. I always thought that Infallible was such a good idea just to try to make something different, and the arrangements are so different, but for some reason it feels that it's just they were aiming to make this big song, this like reflective. It's kind of like a preteen version of 7 O'Clock. I don't know why it always makes me think about that. And 7 O'Clock, yeah, and I think 7 O'Clock really achieves the purpose of that reflective message in a song, but also the song feels big and the crowd feels like the song is big. I think with Infallible, we don't get that. There's a really good attempt, if there's a really good idea, but even though the band tried really hard, I don't think the audience responded to it. It's just not there.
Yeah, something with it sonically. Like, nothing else really sounds like it, but it might be to its detriment. I know that people do like the song, and people will stick up for the song for sure, but maybe it's just like my thought about how it is on the record. It follows Lightning Bolt on the record. And like I kind of mentioned, the record never builds back up from there. So that's kind of like the beginning of it kind of dragging to me. And I don't know. It's strange. Sometimes you just don't have a good feeling about something, and you can't really put your finger on why. So you just move on to the next thing and see if that sticks and that works. And I think it has a good message. I think the lyrics have a good message, but yeah, just a strange one. But you know what? Never discount them for making attempts that sound a little bit different, because there's stuff on Gigaton that definitely sounds a little bit different too. I mean, 7 O'Clock for most people, I love 7 O'Clock, and I know you love 7 O'Clock too, and for most people that one comes off as a little wordy, a little bit too long, but like it has a big kind of cathartic moment. Infallible kind of has a cathartic moment, but I feel like the song doesn't earn it. Yeah. Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, I can see that. That's what I was referring to when I was trying to put the example with 7 O'Clock too. Is the band is really trying, but it's kind of like the song didn't get there, didn't earn the size that it was meant to be.
Right. Rearview Mirror closing the set though. Wishlist is real quick. Weird spot. I would never think to put Wishlist before Rearview Mirror, but here we are. It was dedicated to Colonel John McDonough, who I believe was mentioned at another show at one point. I believe it was an MSG show. It could have been the 9/11 show at MSG a couple years back, but I am not 100% on that. If anybody wants to check my work, you're more than welcome to. But Rearview Mirror was a really solid way to end out this main set. I believe it was like 18 songs or so. And it feels like the bridge kind of had this moment that was like hovering there. and maybe just kind of waiting for everything to go off and tee off. And I was kind of sitting there wondering if it was going to happen at first. And then it just like out of nowhere kind of snaps into that. And that was really cool. But I think also, we always kind of hang on the bridge a little bit because that's always the one that's going to feel different every single night. But the thing I really loved about this was the way they rally at the end. It gets played up really big, but also when you can go extra measures among the extra measures on this to continue blasting away, and it makes you think of the Dave A moments on this when it's the studio record where he had to be encouraged to play this at full blast that made him throw his drumsticks against the wall, making it that intense. I feel like this version has a little sense of that there, that everything was just getting pushed till it absolutely couldn't get pushed anymore.
Yeah, you're right about that. I really like when the song goes from that transition that you get kind of like spacey, but then you feel that you really hit the gas at the end. And I think that's one of the things that really caught my attention for the show too, because it's something that I think we're gonna mention, like fast forward towards the end, that kind of like up and down feels a little hard to connect, but it's a really good way to close the first set. And again, I know that you are thinking you guys are just entitled bitches and stuff like that, but because we are a little bit in a way, because we're so lucky that we are talking about a band with more than 20 plus years of career and they're like playing 30 plus songs a night. But it does feel like a long set. Like it's song number 18, but you're kind of like, okay, these guys have been playing for a while now, and then we still have 2 encores to go.
Yeah, I always kind of thought that, I don't know, maybe it's the way that the beginning, and it has a lot of chapters. 2013 has a lot of chapters to it. And especially that that you got like 10 to 12 more songs left and still played with a lot of time. Like, it does feel like a long show. I always kind of separate the main set being its own show as opposed to the encores being kind of like their own little show. So, yeah, but I mean, that's kind of the magic too, that they're able to do this, that it's kind of like an act 1 and an act 2. And it works. It works during this era. But yes, it is a lot. It is a lot. 2013, 2014 shows in one sitting can be a little bit tough, for sure. But still very good. All right, let's do this real quick. Encore break, pause for station identification. And look, if you've been listening for a long time, you know the drill. We are always looking for donations on Patreon. Javi, you know the drill. We're always looking for new content on Patreon. I know the drill. We're always looking for new content on Patreon. So we are going to get into that when we have a chance to just rest. I realized how busy I was just this past week because I didn't realize that we were like almost in the middle of June now. And I'm like,
Middle of the
shit.
year.
We're getting close to birthday time for my kiddo and party and stuff that I planned for that. But also, I have my first summer concerts this week. Yeah. And they're kind of just popping up. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I got to make plans for those things. I got to drive 2.5 hours away to go to see Primus at Saratoga. I love my concert lineup here for this whole entire summer. And we can get into that on another show, but I got Primus, Wilco, and Mumford & Sons all within like a 6-day stretch. So I'm not going to be concert out. I will promise you that I will not be concert out, but it's going to be a lot of fun. So anyway, back to the point of the conversation here is that we do a lot of work for this podcast. We put a lot of effort in. It's effort that very clearly we're having difficult time finding extra time to do stuff for. So what we ask in return is for a little bit of a donation to help us get through this time where we need to afford to keep this podcast together, where we need to consider going out on tour, consider going to Ohana, which is very, very up in the air right now, but we'll let you know if that's happening at a later date. If it ends up happening, that is 100% very much a gray area, but we shall see. Never say never. But look, all of that goes into helping the podcast, helping us, give us a little bit of grace when it comes to, hey, do we need this thing? Did this thing break? We need a subscription to this because it makes our life easier for this. If we didn't have Patreon, if we didn't have donations, if we didn't have so many people coming through for us, we may be sitting here saying we can't afford to do it. And we definitely don't want to go the route of selling advertising because you guys don't deserve that. I've said that millions and millions of times. So this is what we're doing. And as always, we try to give you back as much as humanly possible. So that is the plan moving forward. And let's just give you the websites to go to. Go to liveonfourlegs.com, first of all, and check out all the Concertpedia articles. But you can join up on Patreon by going to the top of any page and clicking the Become a Patron button. Or you can just go to patreon.com/liveonfourlegs and do it that way. You can also download the Patreon app. That's a good way to listen to all of the archival footage that we have on the platform, and that should be easy for you guys to utilize as well. So all good things. And yes, we will keep hammering home that we need Javi's episode very, very, very soon for Hard to Imagine on the Gear Garage. So you're back in the garage.
What?
Well,
What?
Gonna chain you up in there. Put some headphones on you and make you go. And every time that you hit a wrong note in your guitar, I'm gonna whip you with that chain.
Sounds kind of like abuse, but I kind of like it. No, I'm just kidding.
No, it's
Yeah.
more like bondage.
Yeah, true. Yes,
We're bonding with bondage.
Yeah, there's a little bit of off time coming up, so it shouldn't take that long. But yeah, it needs to be done. Although, but we have a couple more surprises in this series too that I think will reveal when the time comes. But like, I'm excited for those too.
Definitely. It should be very, very soon. So keep your thoughts on that. All right, back to the rock. It's a great sounding room. We're all set up here, so we should just keep playing. It's always a good sign when there's kids in the front row, meaning it's safe to be up there. And I want to confer with the parents of these kids that if they have to leave and go to bed, we can wait for 10 minutes. You know, stay in school, kids. And I didn't make it through junior year. Look at me. You don't want that. Then he talks about everybody's like school experience, and we've heard that before. Oh, Mike, you went to Pizza University, and Stone went to art school, and Matt worked at Kinko's, and yada yada yada. Jeff went to play basketball in Montana and all that. And then somewhere in the middle of this, totally random, but he's communicating with a woman in front, and he's like, I believe there's a woman in the audience that wants to propose to a man. So he's just like, yeah, this is very forward thinking. I appreciate this. He's, very pleasantly surprised. So she gets the mic and she's very confident on the mic. And you got to be uber confident with yourself to have to interrupt a show like this. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing at all, but it's kind of crazy to think that you can do that.
Justin Clemens, will you come up here, please? He's right back there. He's got a checkered shirt, plaid. Justin Clemens. Sorry. I love you with all my heart. You're the most beautiful man I ever met. And I guess I have to get on my knee.
It looks that way.
Will you marry me?
Did not expect that at all from this show. So I believe because of that, we get a little impromptu change in the set that's befitting of the moment. So this section here was supposed to start off with Yellow Moon, but it now is starting off with Just Breathe, and then Yellow Moon, and then Parting Ways and Jeremy. Originally, this set was supposed to have Other Side right in the middle of this. And I'm going to guess that because time didn't allow for it, it was the one that was cut. That's a pretty big deal. Pretty big deal, but, sometimes spontaneous things happen, and you got to go with it. No bass for Just Breathe, but we get the mic plucking on it. It's kind of useless, but, it is what it is. Right. But, however, I think my interest here is actually on Yellow Moon. We never get to talk about it because I think we kind of gloss over this era. And obviously, what we've been doing in the last 30 episodes or so with this series going in chronological order, we wouldn't have any opportunities until right now to do it. But I happen to, if I'm making a list of a top 12 from this record, Yellow Moon is probably like within the first 4 or 5 of my favorites from Lightning Bolt. It's just a very beautiful and peaceful song. The lyrics are great. The line that kind of puts the chorus together, the Yellow Moon on the Rise bit, I don't know if it was poached directly from the song Helpless, the CSNY song, but obviously the obsession with Neil Young and that being a Neil song, highly possible that could have been intentional, but I like that it's kind of a question in there that, hey, maybe not. I don't think it's a rare thing to say Yellow Moon on the Rise, but the way it's sung makes me think it's a possibility. But I just want to say this. If Lightning Bolt ended up being a record that was more of a concept that had more songs that were like Yellow Moon, I think I'd really like it.
I could definitely see that. For me, when I heard Yellow Moon, I thought that it was such an interesting thing because it was, you're getting later at a time where like this kind of song is a little bit more familiar to the fans to be included in a record, like kind of like slow tempo, but kind of like the combination was very unusual. This goes all the way back to probably one of the first things that I ever said in a podcast or in this podcast, because I never participated in any other podcast before. But
and you have a contract that says you can't.
No. Oh, I didn't know that we had an NDA. But also, Yellow Moon has one of the most interesting stories about the most useless pedal ever been used in a Pearl Jam rig. Because it was the size of a little amp. The name of the thing is a Ludwig 9000 Phase 2 synth that it was only exclusive for Yellow Moon. And then Mike McCready figured out that he can make the same sound with a Pog. Therefore, they didn't carry the thing anymore because it was honestly this little amp-sized thing right next to Mike's side that he will only use if Yellow Moon was going to be included on the set. I have a very strong feeling that it is a song that is going to age extremely well.
I hope so.
Yeah, I really hope so too.
And I like the back-to-back here with Parting Ways. I think it can't be understated that Parting Ways is just one of these songs that just does not ever get to see the stage. It took them 98 shows before playing it again. The last time they had played it was back in Philly at the Spectrum shows, which I believe had featured a string section, including April Cameron on it. So, like, pretty well known version of Parting Ways for sure. And I think it had a long delay before even getting to that show, too. So it's returning here, one of the many rarities that found its way back during this tour. And it's cool because the song got some upbeat momentum during it. And then as the bridge into the drifting away part kind of happens, it levels out a little bit and it gets very calm. And the song is known for kind of being the opposite. When you get into the drifting away, you don't get calmer, you get like edgier, you get rougher, you get like bombastic, and you get the drums and you get a little bit of the Sonic Youth kind of noise that, you know, they did play the song with Sonic Youth a little bit back in 2000, so it's a little bit reflective of that. And in this, they use that kind of calmness to build back up without that kind of intensity. And it's really interesting the way they do it, because I don't remember versions like that kind of happening if it didn't have like a string section or something like that. I was very much waiting for Cameron to kind of completely, you know, spaz out for his part, but it didn't happen. It's kind of nice to not have that force. Change the song's identity.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. It feels like a different song because you were kind of expecting that, but then you have this very gentle fade out. I was very surprised when I was listening to this. Because also, like, the expectation is when you have a song like this, is you want to have that crowd interaction at the end because it gets so intense. You didn't get it, but the follow-up to that is where you really get the crowd invested with, like, a hit like Jeremy. My thing is, though, there's something missing in Jeff's space. For me, sounds a little too harsh, if that's me being hypercritical of stuff. But I'm going to go back to the comment that I said, like, the investment of the crowd. Like, wow, they were really all for this.
Oh, yeah. I mean, anytime you bring Jeremy to any crowd, but you bring it to a crowd that's not a massive city type crowd, and that's going to be the one there where, like we've mentioned all episode, they hadn't played Oklahoma City in 10 years. So there's people that maybe have never seen Pearl Jam before. This could be the song they're waiting for the whole entire night. And it means everybody's teeing off on it. And it's a much needed response because Just Breathe doesn't elicit that. Yellow Moon doesn't elicit that. Parting Ways definitely doesn't elicit that. A lot of people in that crowd might not even know what it is because binaural might just be overlooked in that part of the country. Who knows? And I'm not saying hardcore fans. I'm saying the casual people that will react to Jeremy. So you did need that as kind of the buffer. And I don't want to call that a buffer, but like the sort of big moment before going into this whole diatribe here. So here we go. Ed introduces this as a story from a long time ago in a city very, very far away. Jeff is wearing a Kevin Durant Sonics jersey that I believe he wore for exactly one season because he was drafted, wore the jersey, and then they moved. So let's hear this whole thing because this is essentially what drew us to the show.
A long time ago, in a city very far away, there was a team, a great team. It's your team. Are you booing? If you boo that, it's all confusing. See, here's the deal. It has nothing to do with Oklahoma or Oklahoma City or Tulsa or the state or the people or the locals, anything, or this building, and that has nothing. It's simply that it would be like, you know, your girlfriend that you were with, long time relationship, and you were a great person in the relationship and the whole thing, and then you wouldn't like her new husband. So it has nothing to do. If it was Fresno, I'd be pissed off at Fresno. The people that are really fucked this over in this is Sacramento. Fuck Sacramento. That's what I meant to say. But when you think about it, and if you've ever been to Sacramento, yeah, they're already kind of fucked. So, but you know, something we will stand by. There's a guy, if you know anything about this basketball thing, there's a guy called Howard Schultz in Seattle. Now, fuck him. I'll stand by that one. Fuck him. Oh, wait. I can give up coffee, but they do sell records in Starbucks. So, no? What? So anyways, was there anything else I was going to say about the subject? No, but it was when Oklahoma, when you guys were in the playoffs, we were all in Seattle rooting for you because it's our fucking team. We love it. Congratulations. We hope you get them all the way. And we have a good friend here who came to a playoff game last season, and he said the energy in this building was the best he'd ever seen in a basketball game. And it was I believe it. I believe it. So you know, by the time we come back, we'll probably have a team in Seattle. We could talk more about it. And we won't be bitter and angry anymore. So this song, is called Supersonic. How's that? I've been dreaming of getting along. Now I'm awake and dreaming, keeping on and keeping on.
All right. So that's a lot to take in. It's a lot of, I get it. I grew up with my father losing the Brooklyn Dodgers when he was 7 or 8 years old. That sucks to lose your team. That sucks to lose your team. But also, Ed is up there saying all this stuff, and like, dude, I get you're committed to Seattle, and I get you live there, but you're a Bulls fan, man. He's acting like he's been this lifelong Sonics fan, but I think he's also channeling a little bit of Jeff's voice here, because Jeff is really the one that's the massive Sonics fan. So it's tough. It was a really bitter situation. They should have had a team. For a long time, I couldn't even recognize the NBA without the Sonics. Like, they were that kind of important of a team in the 90s. And then it all just kind of poof and went away. Like, the Sonics just, they were cool. It was cool to own Sonics gear. It was cool to own a Sonics jersey. Just like it was cool to own Hornet shit. Like, NBA just had this, like, grasp of pop culture in the 90s. Thanks to Jordan, and a little bit of Magic and Bird, kind of the tail end of that, but it became huge, and the Sonics were a great part of that. I think that's my favorite NBA Jam combo, is Sean Kemp and Gary Payton. What's your NBA Jam combo?
Oh, that's a really good question. But now that you're talking about the Sonics, let's not forget about Death Left Shrimp.
Oh, never.
That is another song that I was waiting to about a Sonic relationship.
Yeah, I remember that.
Of course,
Shrimp, he was on a ton of teams. He was like on the Pacers too, right?
Yes. Yep,
I feel like
yep.
he was a
He was,
Pacer.
yeah. And if you haven't heard that song, if you're listening, like just do yourself a favor and go listen to it because it's actually a beautiful song.
I kind of reignited myself with that song not too long ago because I saw somebody talk about it. I'm like, oh yeah, I kind of remember that. Yeah. But I mean, the Sonics also knee deep in pop culture with singles. They were tied to
Yeah.
grunge, you know? They were tied to the
Yep.
movement. So one of the things that Ed mentions is like he kind of says, fuck the city of Sacramento. There was a chance that the Sacramento Kings were going to get sold to Steve Ballmer. If you don't know Steve Ballmer, you probably should. He's one of the richest men in the entire world. He now owns the Clippers, thanks to the former Clippers owner getting caught being a racist on an answering machine or something like that. So he didn't end up buying the Kings because he said that's our goal is to move them back to Seattle and do the Sonics. But former NBA player Kevin Johnson played for the Suns. He was the mayor of Sacramento at the time, and he put a big push to keep the team in the town, raised a ton of money for it, and they built this kind of downtownish area around the arena, which isn't bad. It's pretty nice over there. It's pretty nice. I've been there. Like Sacramento is not my favorite city in the world, and I don't know a lot of people that would go to bat for Sacramento in full, but they ended up selling it to a local investor and it never happened to move. But the big talk lately in the NBA, I believe, is expansion to 32 teams, which the two top locations would end up being Seattle and Las Vegas. So let's hope for it. It is long overdue. I might watch the NBA again if they move back to Seattle. I might watch it. Supersonic goes into Satan's bed. I think he says, "Oh, Howard Schultz is Satan" or something like that, and they play Satan's bed. And then Porch is going to be the capper to all this. Satan's bed is a really good performance, but I think that we need to spend a little bit of time on Porch here. For the last handful of years, Porch had kind of been a shell of itself from maybe like 2003 up until this point. Because everybody knew what the expectation was from Porch from back in the 90s. Oh, Ed is going to do something crazy. The band is going to do something crazy. And then in like 05 and 06, it kind of shifted a little bit to where like Ed would play it acoustically before in some presets, and then he would kind of have the riffy intro that got thrown into the mix, and it was just a completely different way of seeing Porch, and I don't think it hit quite as well as what came before and what came after. And 2013, I think, is Porch's true revival. You got to look at some stats, first off. When they were playing it in the years prior, it hovered around being played at around 50% of those shows. Like the year prior to this in 2012, I think it was played like 56%, played 40-something percent the year before that. And then you look at this year in 2013, 87% of the time it's played. The next year is 94% of those shows. And that's probably a little bit off because there are two Bridge School shows in 2014. And that's probably where it's not 100% and it's 94%. So Porch is now back to being an every night showcase. And because you have the orbs coming down, and we have no idea how many times they've had to replace those orbs, how expensive it was to replace those orbs, because there were times where those orbs would be swinging back and forth and Mike and Jeff would just be playing orb baseball with those things and just shatter them. Ed would be swinging on them back and forth. Like Ed rides the orb in this version of Porch, and Yeah, I mean, it's big because it's the closest he would come in his late 40s to climbing off of scaffolding or something like that. It's a spectacle again. They found what they needed to find to make Porch feel important, to make it feel nostalgic. And it wasn't there for a very, very, very long time. So I've always thought of 2013 being the redemption year for Porch just because of that. And after this point, it has basically never left the set. I had some complaints. I think we've had some complaints about Porch. And if you do it too often and don't mix it in with Rear Mirror enough, then it's going to start to get a little bit bland and like not carry that identity. Yeah, some of that, but in 2013, none of that. Every single night felt important with this.
And fresh. Like having the concept of the orbs going down and the band interacting with them and playing orb baseball or whatever they were trying to play. I remember and I remember that there were like even some shows where Jeff is kind of like boxing and dancing with the orb guy, kind of like going back and forth too. But yeah, going back to your point, we got to a point where Porch will never leave the set again. But around this time, it felt like it was definitely a showstopper, but with everything that it was surrounding the song too. And I'm glad that they did it because I to make it feel fresh again, I think the song needed something a little extra. And if including the orbs or including the interaction or it swinging back and forth, it was needed, so be it. I thought that was pretty cool that was included.
It just brings you back to a time where it felt reckless in all the best ways, where you knew once Ed started to disappear during the solo, he was going to come back in a place that he was putting his life at risk. He's not putting his life at risk at shows in 2013, but he is making some cool shows, and that helps a lot. Encore 2 right here. As they come on stage, Ed offers to write a note to the kids' teachers, brings up those kids in front again. It's getting past their bedtimes, I'm sure. And then he says, all right, we're going to do one for the back. They thank the opening band, which we mentioned before. There were only, I think, 2 shows where there was an opening band on this tour. Midlake was the opener. Name a Midlake song.
He never knew that they were a band.
See? There you go. So sometimes you get My Morning Jacket, and other times you get Midlake. And Ed gives Big Pete a shout out because Big Pete's family was there. So now we get into flipping around for the back with a little Last Kiss. And that'll segue to State of Love and Trust and Black. The setup at this time, turning around towards the back, was always fun on this tour. Whether it was Last Kiss or it was Small Town, it was usually one of the two, and maybe Soldier of Love thrown in there as well every now and again. But it was more of a prepared thing than in the past because we saw like Matt has a little kit back there. And in tours prior to this, he didn't have that. He would just kind of play on his kit while everybody else shifted. So I like how they made this more of a thing, and they knew that they were selling tickets back there. So, you know, let's do this every night. Let's make it become part of the show. It was a nice way to interpret it. But before State of Love and Trust, we're getting some Mookie Blaylock discussion. And he mentions, of course, it being the original name for the band. And when we were trying to come up with a real name, because Mookie may or may not have liked us to use that name, we were going to go with Duran O'Shea. And when he says that, he thought he made a great joke, but it got zero reaction from the crowd until he said, well, that was Mookie's real name, guys. That was Mookie's real name. And he brings it up only because he went to the University of Oklahoma. So everybody's like, oh, okay, we get it now. He says that the first song that they ever played in Oklahoma was State of Love and Trust, and I cannot confirm that to be the case because the first time they ever played in Oklahoma City was back in 1991, and there is no set list for that, so cannot confirm or deny, but can't get in the way of a good story, right? So, yeah, State of Love and Trust, Black. Ed throws the mic into the crowd for some fans up front to sing. Black is excellent as always. The ending is kind of like a goodbye to the crowd, as at the end they kind of sway their hands back and forth, and Ed just keeps singing, bye, 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 goodbye, bye, bye. And we get the little bit of the change on We Belong Together to the We Didn't Belong Together, which I've always loved during this era because it shows growth and maturity and how the song had changed so much meaning within 20 plus years of time. When he's doing that and unplugged, there's still this anguish, there's still this hurt, there's still this pain that he has in his heart. And you can feel it when he's shrieking, when he's doing, woo, woo, we belong. You can feel that that's still something that sits in him and eats at him every day. And in this era, when he just very casually does that, we didn't belong together, you could tell that his life has changed for the better. He's grown. He's obviously married with kids at this point, and he can look back at that and still like feel the way that he was feeling at the time, but acknowledge that the way that it happened ended up being the way that it should have happened.
Yeah, there's another line that he utilized in South America, actually, when he started to play at the end of Black, and he said, "Goodbye, goodbye, so long. I didn't need you to make my dreams come true."
Yeah, that sounds familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, and it like going back to what you were saying, it's more like a relief. I'm singing something that it meant something that it was so big for me. More like those feelings that you could tell at the beginning where like there was really something that it was still part of him and he was trying to express that over the lyrics of the song or any tag that we will have at the end. But a little bit of a time crunch because you can really tell that he's actually saying goodbye to the crowd. Like, hey
Yeah.
guys, like this is kind of the chance where like that I have to say goodbye because we're gonna play 3, 4 more songs like very quickly and we're not gonna have a lot of time.
Right. Right. Yeah. They're swaying their hands back and forth. So it makes sense. But I mean, after that, you get bread and butter, alive, Baba led, and there's lots of big emotion there. You turn on the lights and you get connected with the crowd for one last time. And Ed kind of commends the crowd. I believe it was going into Baba and says how wonderful it was to play there, followed by that Oklahoma okay proclamation. So that's from something, probably the musical Oklahoma, but yeah, I don't think I remember ever seeing that. So it's a pretty much expected kind of bread and butter to cap off the night. It's fun. It connects with the crowd. Throwing tambos one last time. Ed also takes a note from a fan and reads it to himself during Baba, and he doesn't like quite have a reaction to it. So I really wonder what the hell it said, because he looks at it and kind of looks down and kind of gives it this like, huh? Okay, like maybe it was something a little like too deep and he didn't have time to process it at this moment because he didn't like go back to the fan and he's like, hey man, I see you.
Yeah.
Like that's probably in their vault somewhere in the warehouse, if I were to guess. Any thoughts on the end of the show?
Just bread and butter. I like that they have the lights on so they can see the crowd. The only thing that I think I mentioned before we started the recording is around this time Encore 2 feels a little rushed. There's a little
Yeah.
too much to get into it, you know, so sometimes you don't have the right time to just to process or digest all the emotions that you're supposed to feel with the songs that are being played.
Yeah. I can't disagree with that. Yes. It's a 35-minute encore too. That is very light for 6 songs, and at least like 3 of those 6 songs being, sometimes extended to like 8 to 10 minutes long. So, yeah. But that's our show. Oklahoma City 2013. We got the Thunder and Sonic references and all that. But performance wise, where do we stand with it and how are we going to give this a top 3?
Yeah, that's interesting. it was a show that I had a little bit of issues trying to connect with it, but I feel that it's just more related to how I felt about the album around that time too. That I felt that it was kind of like a postcard from different time eras. I do have three favorites though. It's going to be Yellow Moon on the number three for me. Number two is going to be Lightning Bolt because it's a really good song live, and number one is going to be Whipping. I really really like it for this week.
I got two of your moments there. I will say that. I'm going to say my number three is going to be Sometimes because I really felt like that transition just made that and kind of revved the setup a little bit. And then my number two is going to be Yellow Moon. And my number one from this show is going to be Lightning Bolt because I just felt energized by it because we hadn't heard it in a long time. I'm not going out there listening to the Lightning Bolt record, and I'm not listening to a lot of other shows in the time that I'm doing the research for this. So it's been a long time since I've heard a great version of Lightning Bolt, and that one just hit the right spots. Okay, now we can rate the show.
This is tough because I'm trying to be fair too, but like I was saying before, I had a tough time trying to connect with the show. Sometimes when you have so many songs and it feels that maybe the consistency aspect is a little tough. But I'm always going to commend the fact that they were trying to experiment, that they were trying to get as much as they can out because they want to keep themselves interested and they want to make their own music interesting for them and they want to revisit things that maybe they have not played in a long time. My biggest thing is the consistency. I think sometimes the show goes up and down. So I'm sitting with an 8 for a show this week.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think that this is one of the 2013 shows that really is a wow show. We picked it because there was a great story to tell with the Sonics that made a lot of sense. And I've been kind of wanting to tell that story for a while. But set list was a little clunky. Performance is pretty good, but not to the best of the abilities that they could have at the time. Set list choices in some places were a little like, okay, that one, maybe, maybe not. Other side could have been cool, but can't dock points for that because there was a proposal, so got to give that a little bit of credit. I'm at like a 7.5 on this one. I think it hits that average rating. Eights are good. I think 7.5 is pretty good to average kind of area where I'd recommend it, but I wouldn't go to it first. And there's way more in 2013 than I think I would put on people's plates. Even performance wise from this, I don't know which ones I'd send in people's directions. I would just probably be like, oh, yeah, this is the one where they talk about the Sonics, obviously. But that just means that 2014 has a lot to live up to for next week, and I think it will. This is one of our highest requested episodes of the last couple of years. Just from people just wanting stuff that had already requested episodes, people that requested this, people just talking about shows in general. And I've stayed away from it because I had so much respect and love for that lead show that it just stayed in my mind that I just like that lead show is everything to me. But the follow up show is still a really, really good one. And that's Milton Keynes that we're going to do next week. The final show of the European tour in 2014. Milton Keynes, a lot of people have wanted it. Well, you're finally getting it. So there it is. Prepare yourselves. It's going to be a long one. That's a 35 song set. So that's what we're talking about when it comes to this era. Long, long, long shows. And also, we get the rare preset song, same as main set song performance in this. Don't know what I'm talking about? Tune in next week. So that's all we got here. Thanks everybody for tuning in. It's getting down to the nitty gritty with the chronology series. So if you've liked this, please let us know. Either comment over social media or subscribe to the podcast on any of your favorite podcast platforms. You can do it on YouTube. You can do it on Apple. You can do it on Spotify. And while you're there, you might as well leave us a comment, leave us a rating, anything that puts positivity into the air that we're doing a good job. You let people know what you think of this, and it'll catch like wildfire. It's done it before. It will do it again. I have full confidence in that. So all it needs is one person to kickstart it, and that person could be you. Be a good Samaritan. Hey, maybe it's even better than donating a couple bucks to Patreon. That you can do. It's for free. You might as well try. So, with that being said, this is the end. We're here, but not for much longer. And although we may be parting ways, miss you already, miss you always. Ugh, I'm so glad I'm done speaking today. I just want to throw that out there. I feel like my voice barely got through this show. I've had clunkiness in my throat, just kind of like Ed had this show, but that's all right. I'll be back at 100% for next week. I will leave you all with this message. Always be evolving. For next week, we will see you on the pod.
See you next week.